Welcome to the Brand and Market Podcast, where branding clarity meets marketing strategy. I'm your host, Allie Haney, founder of Brand and Market, a boutique agency dedicated to helping small businesses craft intentional brands and effective marketing plans. Each week, I share practical tips and insights to help you, especially those of you in real estate-related industries, build a standout brand to attract your brand's biggest fans. Let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Brand and Market Podcast. I'm your host, Allie Haney. Today, we are going to be talking about the Dome House. If you follow me on Instagram, then you have already seen some behind the scenes of the Dome House, but I am very excited to announce that at the time of this airing of this episode, we will have just closed on said Dome House. So let me knock on wood. No, that is not a reference to a Taylor Swift song. It is just a normal saying that nothing goes wrong between now and next Friday when we're supposed to close, because I am recording this episode ahead of time so that I can record it while things are still fresh in my mind. I really wanted to walk you through our experience of purchasing a short-term rental, because this is the first time that we've purchased a short-term rental with the specific intent that it will be used as such. In the past, we have kind of accidentally stumbled into the short-term rental world. Once in North Carolina, when we purchased our first home as a couple, it was our primary home that we then converted into a short-term rental after we moved. And then in Kentucky, when we purchased the property to be a wedding venue and ended up not being able to do that, we converted that house into a short-term rental as well. So this is the first time when we were looking for homes to purchase, that this was the specific intent behind it. So we've been looking for a short-term rental for a while. We had been pre-approved since, I believe it was about March or April. As soon as I got back from the Level Up Your Listing Summit back in March, it really inspired me to kind of take the next steps forward to be able to pursue that dream. So we've been looking for a long time. And I think one of the first things that made it hard for us to make a decision was because we didn't have a specific spot in mind, a specific market in mind that we were only looking at. We were looking at a few different markets. We are originally from Charlottesville, Virginia, so right in the middle of the state. I co-host an Airbnb there already, so obviously we're very familiar with that area, although it is a little bit expensive. We kind of were looking a little bit further out in the mountains near Charlottesville. We looked in the mountains of North Carolina. Real estate there is a little bit cheaper right now due to the after effects of Hurricane Helene from about a year ago. And we were looking kind of everywhere in North Carolina. It was very attractive to me to be able to have a property that was geographically close to us. So we were looking in the Raleigh area. We also had previously owned a short-term rental in eastern North Carolina, right near the beach. Granted, it was not a beach house, but it was near the military base and near the water. So we were looking there too, just because we were familiar with that area as well. It was a slow going process because we didn't have that specific spot in mind. So when I was kind of switching gears, where I wasn't really wanting to look at a specific area as opposed to the specific ROI on the investment, I switched gears a little bit. So like I said, we were pre-approved, so I knew we had a budget in mind of what we were able to spend on this second home. I don't even remember where I first encountered this. I think it was Instagram. But I found this daily email that's called the offer sheet. The offer sheet daily, I believe is what it's called. I can link that in the show notes. And I signed up for it kind of on a whim, because this email gives you a daily list of properties that are for sale that could be used potentially as short-term rentals. Now, they don't do all the vetting of the zoning and all of that, but they do break down in this area what the average daily rate is of where the house is. They break down what your monthly expenses could be, what your monthly revenue could be, and therefore what your cash on cash return can be. And it is really nice that they aggregate all of those listings from all across the United States into one email. I believe they offer a free version and a paid version. I was on the free version for a while, and I think there they send you 3 to 5 listings per day, versus on the paid version, they send you anywhere from 10 to 16 properties a day. And a few months ago, I upgraded to the paid version, and believe it or not, I found the Dome House in the offer sheet daily email. That was where I first encountered it, because Otherwise, I would not have been looking in Fancy Gap, Virginia, which is where this property is. When I was doing a little bit more research into Fancy Gap, once this property crossed my inbox, there's not much there. It's just a rural mountain area. This particular house is off of a gravel road. And if it had not already been operating as a short-term rental, then my biggest concern would have been like, can we get people out to this property to begin with? Because it is so far away from everything. However, in that offer daily sheet email, it did say that it was an existing short-term rental and that you could potentially stay in it overnight to give it a go and see if it was a good fit. And I don't know if they said that in the MLS description as a joke or not, but we actually took them up on it. I'm actually going to pause this recording so I can pull up the email to give you a timeline of when I found this. The email was originally sent on September 11th, and it was listed for $317,000, average daily rate $216, expected occupancy rate around 60%, expected monthly income $3,942 for a cash-on-cash return of 18.7%. So 18.7% was kind of lower than I was looking for. It's still really good. Looking through this email every single day, you see some cash on cash return that's as low as like 5% and some that are high as like 45%. So I was like, well, if there's a way that I can buy a cheaper property and have a higher cash on cash return, well, that's what everybody wants, right? So that's what I've kind of been looking for in conjunction with figuring out where it was in reference to our own home. So this Fancy Gap property is just at like 3 hours away. So it's not a place where I can immediately just like drop everything if something needs a guest needs something and go drive to it, right? But it is within a drivable distance. So I am going to have somebody locally that I know I can count on. Typically in the past, who I have used is our cleaners. When I go to hire our cleaners, I will say, hey, are you willing to do some additional duties, i.e. potentially receive stock if I can't have it shipped directly to the house of like toilet paper, paper towels. And oftentimes they are open to that because they live there. I will pay them a little bit extra. Oftentimes the cleaners that are cleaning the Airbnb, that's their main sort of niche within the cleaning world. They're not always cleaning just residential homes every 2 weeks. They specifically cater to short-term rental owners. It's not something that's totally out of the ordinary to ask them, although I do always offer to pay them additional to be able to do that. That was a side tangent. But once I saw this property on the offer sheet daily, I did a little bit more digging. I was able to find the Airbnb listing. From there are a few different things that I will do anytime that I see a property that might be interesting to me on this email. So the first thing is I will run it through AirDNA, just the general market. So what AirDNA does, and AirDNA is there's a free version. I have the paid version. It's a complex tool that can take you down quite the rabbit hole. But anytime that I'm trying to judge whether or not a property is worth looking into more, first, I will just put in the general market. So I put in Fancy Gap, Virginia. And then I will look at the general market first just to see what the average revenue is for that area. But you have to keep in mind that when that average revenue amount is spit out, that's including everything from like studio apartments all the way up to like a 5-bedroom house. And it's also including listings that are not always live. So this could be something like an owner lives there for 6 months out of the year and only Airbnbs it for 6 months out of the year. So that's 6 months of annual, in quotation marks, revenue is going to be calculated into that average. So I first look at the general market and don't put any filters on it. And then I will try to narrow it down to full-time Airbnbs and ones that are comparable in bath and bed count for what we are looking for. So I ran it through AirDNA and saw that the numbers weren't like super impressive. But the thing about the Dome House is that it does stand out within the Fancy Gap market because most of the Fancy Gap market properties are cabins in the woods. And so I knew that the architecture was going to be a differentiating factor just from the jump, which means that we could likely command a higher nightly rate than the cabins that you could get a dozen of. The next thing that I ran it through was a platform called B&B Calc. And I used this one in comparison to AirDNA to kind of fact check itself, because and I believe you can do this with AirDNA too, with B&B Calc, you can put in your property's address or the prospective property's address, and it will spit out potential numbers to you based off of other comps in the area. And so I was curious if, and sometimes they can source data from existing short-term rentals, like the numbers they actually made on Airbnb and VRBO, et cetera. So that looked a little bit more promising. I want to say AirDNA spit out a number around 30K. And then B&B Calc spit out a number that was closer to like 60K. I want to say it was like 57,000. And so I knew that having such vastly different numbers, like one was twice the other, that we would probably fall somewhere in between there. And so that's kind of what I was operating off of to see as our baseline. Does that cover our expenses? Is this actually right compared to this offer sheet data that they sent to us of monthly expected income of $39,042? So let's round up to $4,000 income a month and times 12, so $48,000. So I was about right. It all seems to kind of line up there. So that's what we were operating off of to begin with. We ran it through AirDNA, ran it through B&B Calc, and took a number somewhere in between there that then was supported by the offer sheet daily. From there, what we did was ask the listing agent if they had any existing P&Ls, because like I said, remember, it was a current Airbnb listing. So I wanted to see the numbers at least for the last year, if not for multiple years, if they had them. And they did have them for about 18-ish months. I think some of them might have been a little bit off when they first opened it. So like it was technically 2023 and 2024 numbers, but 2023 numbers were a little skewed because either they weren't keeping the data specifically or they weren't charging a nightly rate, which I don't think is right. I mean, I can't really fault them too much for that if they were running it like a mom and pop business. Well, I was really just pleased to have the 18 months worth of numbers to look at. And a couple of things that I noticed as I was going through those P&Ls. And for anybody that doesn't know, a P&L is a profit and loss statement. It basically just shows everything that you bring in and everything that goes out of the business. For the P&Ls, I noticed a couple things. The first thing was that the property can pay for itself. Even with the skewed numbers from 2023, it was making a small profit, but a profit nonetheless. The second thing that I noticed was that it looked like we needed to increase the cleaning fee. I was trying to totally understand the spreadsheet that they gave us, but it looked like at the end of the month, they had a deficit of a cleaning fee that they owed the cleaner after they had used the funds from the guests to pay the cleaner. And so, okay, that tells me one thing is we need to increase the cleaning fee on Airbnb, easy fix. The second thing that I noticed was that they were making a lot of money off of pet fees. So this was a pet-friendly property, and we anticipate keeping it so. But it was interesting to me that was kind of one of those things that was tipping them over the edge of profitability, because it was almost every other, if not every other, then 2/3 of the reservations that were bringing a pet. Hey host, you've got a lot of responsibilities on your plate. Guest communication, cleaning coordination, marketing, and everything in between. If you've been listening to this podcast for a while and love all the great actionable tips, but just have zero time to execute on them, then it might be time to get some help. You're in luck. I've been a superhost for over 6 years with over 200 5-star reviews, and I'm here to help you elevate your short-term rental business. I've co-hosted properties across 3 states, managing everything remotely and ensuring my clients' guests have a seamless 5-star experience every single time. Here at Branded Market, we focus on creating a unique guest experience through cohesive branding for your property. It gives boutique hotel rather than side hustle short-term rental. So whether you need help with guest communication, maintaining your listing, or just keeping things running smoothly day to day, my co-hosting services take the stress off your shoulders so you can focus on growing your business and portfolio or getting that side hustle back over to the side. Let me make your listing into your legacy, one great guest experience at a time. Ready to take your short-term rental to the next level? Head to www.brandonmarket.co/co-hosting to learn more about how my co-hosting services can help you. That kind of brings me to my next point, is that I told you guys, I had initially figured that like I was a little wary that Fancy Gap was so far out that no one would come. As I was looking at Fancy Gap, like on a big, like zoomed out map, it is within very close proximity of multiple major cities. So it's about 2 hours from Charlotte, North Carolina. It's about 3 hours from Raleigh, 2 hours from Winston-Salem, 2 hours from Durham, 4 hours from Richmond, Virginia, three-ish, I think 2 or 3 hours from Bristol, Tennessee. So there are some major cities that are within a 2 to 3 hour radius that would come to this property to have an escape for the weekend with their family and their pet, their dog. That's was another reason that we decided to move forward with the Dome House. Next, I want to touch on the fact that we ended up staying at the Dome House prior to purchasing it. I looked at Caleb and I was like, I think we should do it. Let's figure this out. When can you go? So I randomly made him work virtually on a Thursday. And we drove up there as he was like taking calls in the car and drove the 3 hours up. We spent the night with one of our children. Our other two were actually in Virginia with their grandparents, but the baby wanted to stay with us. So it was just me, Caleb, and Emerson. And we stayed there for just one night. So we checked in at around 4 o'clock. We had to check out by 10 a.m. the next day, but we just wanted to be there and like get the feel of the property, see what the drive up to the property was like, because again, that was one of my biggest concerns. So it was actually on a gravel road, but it wasn't a super long distance on a gravel road. And again, like I said, the concept had already been proven because they had, the rentals from 23 and 24 already. We went and it was so nice. Like I remember feeling peaceful. It was quiet. There are creeks throughout the entire property. Just to get to over the driveway, you have to cross over one of the creeks. It's got like a little like concrete bridge type of deal. And it's just peaceful. Like I don't know how else to describe it other than like that property made me want to be outside, even though the architecture of the interior was so cool. Like it just draws you outside. And as I was like walking the property with Emerson and he was like trying to jump in the creek and I just let him, like it was just fun. And I was like, more families need to experience this. I don't think I've ever talked about this on air before, but my mother-in-law's house, that's the one that I co-host outside of Charlottesville, and they have a creek there. And it's like the same feeling that I get on that property of just being peaceful and hearing the water run and hearing the leaves in the wind, just like the crack of the gravel as you're like walking and exploring. It's just so peaceful. That's the word that keeps coming to my mind. And so I was pretty much sold just on the outside of the house, on the landscape of the property. And then you walk inside and it's got some quirks. The house was built in 1995, so it's about 30 years old. It was painted and furnished, not in a way that I would have done it or that we will do it, but it was a little just, quirky. It was still perfect for the guest avatar that we want to be able to host there. It's got 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a loft, and a couple of little, like, of course, a kitchen and living areas. The 2 living areas, one I think we're going to convert into like a specific dining area. And then the other one is going to be more of a dedicated family room. And then as of right now, they have a bed upstairs in the loft. But we have actually hired an interior designer who specializes in short-term rental design. So we're going to lean on her to advise us as to whether or not we should keep that bedroom up there for a higher head and bed count, or if we should just convert that totally into like a play area for the kids. Because as we were walking through the property, it was just very clear to us that this is a place that people should bring their kids to be free. Like, forget the screens, just go outside and play in the creek. Go outside and enjoy the fire pit. Go outside and go to the little reading nook shed thing. And it's been really fun to see Caleb to just dream up what certain parts of the property could be. For example, there's a shed that it's like a garage that has the concrete floor. And right now the current owners are just using that for storage and other furniture and stuff. But then there's also this like kind of older, I don't know, it's like a one-room house almost. I don't think it has electric or water to it. It needs some work. It needs to be rehabbed for sure. But he was like, I would love to make that like a kind of a man cave, speakeasy type of vibe. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. So it's just fun to see his ideas too and figuring out how we can incorporate them into the overall property as well. We did notice that there were a couple things that we needed to change to increase or level up, I guess, the guest experience. There's this one water filter thing that went off in the middle of the night that was so loud. And I had read it in the reviews prior to actually staying at the property, but experiencing it myself, I was like, oh, at first I thought people were being dramatic, like talking about how loud it was. And I'm a pretty heavy sleeper anyway, but they were not being dramatic. It was so loud. And I was like, is there any way we can fix that, Caleb? And he said that apparently there's a timer that we can set. So it's like an easy fix so that it doesn't go off in the middle of the night. It'll go off either during the day or we can get it taken out entirely. So that's one of the challenges that we'll be figuring out once we actually close and get to be hands-on in the property. So next, after we went through and actually visited the property, assessed what we were going to be needing to do, obviously that doesn't take place of an actual home inspection, but it is nice to get eyes on the property and experience it yourself. So after that, I actually came home and copied all of the Airbnb reviews from the existing listing and I threw them into ChatGPT. And I had ChatGPT basically boil all of those. It was like 170 something reviews. Again, proof of concept already done. But I had him boil all those reviews down into the top 3 negative things that they experienced while they were there, like the complaints, and then the top 3 positive things. So I knew exactly what we needed to do to fix those guest reviews, the negative ones that is, and the top 3 things that people loved about the property to keep as we continue to move forward. And one of those things that people complained about was that like water filter thing in the middle of the night. And I'm like, okay, easy fix. We'll figure that out. It's got to be a top priority though. That was a really good thing that we did to give us some insight onto what our first steps were going to be once we acquire the property. Another thing that I wanted to make sure that we were clear on prior to even giving an offer, I also wanted to look up the utilities. And I know that sounds kind of silly, but when we purchased the property in Kentucky, I made the wrong assumption that it was going to be easy to get internet there. And I didn't want to make that assumption again. Like I said, we had stayed at this property so that we knew that there was internet, but it was spotty. It went out in and out on us a couple of times while Caleb was trying to work virtually. So we do think that we're going to make it a priority to get Starlink out there, just like we're doing at the Kentucky property as well. After that mishap in Kentucky, it always is something that I look at prior to purchasing a property is what the utilities are. Is it sewer or septic? Is it on city water? Is it on a well? Like all of those things. The next thing that I always look at, and if you've been around here for a while, you know why, are the zoning laws and any ordinances or permits that are needed in order to run the property for the use that we want to run it for. In Carroll County, which is the county that the Dome House is in, they have absolutely zero zoning. It is very rural, like I said. And I don't think I've ever I've looked at a lot of properties. I've inquired in multiple states about zoning, and I've never encountered somewhere that has zero zoning. They don't even have like a designation of what the land is for. Versus like in Kentucky, we knew that the land was designated agriculture versus like residential. None of that exists in Carroll County. We knew that if we purchased this property and it was 5 acres, we had a vision of potentially adding additional units onto this 5 acres prior to purchasing it, but we wanted to make sure that the Dome House could support our expenses by itself, just to make sure it was a good investment. So because I wanted to add those additional structures, I made sure that I inquired with zoning. And of course, there are a couple things like, I don't want to say hoops we have to jump through. That's not necessarily the right verbiage or vibe that I mean, but like there are certain ordinances that we have to go by in order to add the additional units. However, it is not out of the question to be able to add the additional units on that 5 acres. So that was something that I wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to do moving forward in the future. And then, of course, I told you that we got pre-approved for the mortgage originally back in March or April. That pre-approval, I think, expired like right before we decided we wanted to put in an offer on this. So we had to get pre-approved for the mortgage again. Thankfully, nothing in our financial situation has changed. So that was a pretty easy process. But all of that went into this transaction before we even made the offer. All of that to say, we are very excited. Like I said, we are closing next week. This is going to be part 1 of this episode. It's going to be at least 3 parts. There's got to be another part for like under contract due diligence period, and then getting this thing launched after closing. So I'm going to go ahead and probably actually record the due diligence portion of this episode. And then once we get rocking and rolling post-closing, I will record the finale and be able to actually put a link in the show notes for the actual Airbnb listing. So exciting. Well, thank you guys for being along on this journey with me. I hope that some of this was helpful for you. If you are looking to purchase a short-term rental, absolutely am an open book and happy to run some analysis using that AirDNA tool or the B&B Calc tool, because I have the paid version of both, which is helpful. So anyway, signing off until the part 2 episode of Elysian, which I will touch on in the next episode of branding the whole property. So until next week, talk to you soon. You just completed another episode of the Branded Market Podcast. If you found this helpful, please rate, review, and subscribe to help others find this show and so that you never miss an episode. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for all the resources mentioned today. See you next Wednesday, and as always, I'm here cheering you on as you build your dream brand and business.